Namaskar and welcome to Sansad Television. I am Vishal Dahiya and you're watching our show Perspective. Today we're going to talk about one budget special aspect, that is strengthening the transport infrastructure. Now the transport includes well-developed roads and highways, a widespread railway network, fast-growing aviation and developing ports, shipping and inland waterways infrastructure as well. Road transport is a critical infrastructure for the economic development of a country. It impacts the pace, structure and pattern of development. The total road network in India is approximately 6.4 million kilometers, comprising of national and state highways and urban and rural roads as well. India's PPP framework in highways sector has been ranked first by Asian Development Bank in terms of operational maturity. India has the fourth largest railway system in the world as well, behind only US, Russia and China. And Indian Railways is the single largest employer in India and eighth largest in the world, employing approximately 1.3 million people. Talking about shipping, India is strategically located on the world's shipping routes with a coastline of approximately 7,500 kilometers with 12 major and 200 non-major or intermediate ports. Maritime transport handles around 70% of India's trading in value terms. In today's episode of Perspective, we will discuss and analyze various aspects of these three areas in the transport sector, also needing to understand as to what more needs to be done in these particular areas. And for more on this, we're joined by a distinguished panel of experts. Let me first introduce them to you, beginning with, we have with us Mr. R.K. Pandey, Member Projects with the NHAI, that is National Highway Authority of India. Mr. Gopal Krishna is also joining us, former Secretary, Ministry of Ports, Shipping and Waterways. And we also have with us Mr. Vinod Kumar Yadav, former Chairman of the Railway Board. Welcome, all of you gentlemen, to Sansad TV. Let me begin with you, Mr. Pandey, and let's first start by understanding these three specific, subsectors when we're talking about the transport sector. And where do we stand in terms of roads, highways? As far as I understand, a lot of work is happening, and I was mentioning the PPP framework as well, something which has already been, praised by the ADB and ranked first in terms of operational maturity.
When you talk about infrastructure for a developing country, infrastructure is whole the key. And when we talk about infrastructure, transport infrastructure is one of the major infrastructure. In our country's perspective, where the road transport, which carries the maximum freight as well as passenger movement, it has its own importance. Today in our country, we are carrying roughly 90% of the passenger movement and 65% of the freight movement through roads. So roads in the Indian perspective have the major share in transport sector. As you said in the beginning, that the road network is around 62 lakhs kilometers. We are number 2 in the world. Mm-hmm. And depending upon who is the custodian, it has been divided into various categories. And National Highway is the most important category. When I say National Highway, it is the responsibility of the central government to take care of those roads. Although if you see in terms of the volume, it is only 1.41 lakh kilometer. But in terms of traffic carrying capacity, okay, it carries more than 40% of the total traffic on the road network. Coming to the strategies for development of the roads, road sector is the pioneer as far as exploiting the various sector of the market for development. Mm-hmm. We have all kind of mode of procurement depending upon the risk appetite of the contractor or the concessionaire. People who can take the risk of revenue as well as construction cost, they can opt for BOT, which we call is public-private partnership. People who can't take the revenue risk but can take the engineering and the construction risk only, they can go for different mode. And people who are not even willing to take construction risk, we have item rate contracts.
Okay.
Okay.
We'll come to the later part as well there, Mr. Pandey, in terms of what needs to be done. But let's quickly also take a look at the other two areas. That is, let me first bring in the railways part here. Mr. Vinod Kumar Yadav is with us, former Chairman of the Railway Board. Mr. Yadav, when we're talking about railways also, just like the road sector, it is indeed the lifeline when we talk about connectivity or we talk about, the freight capacity as well. And in the past few years, we've seen that there has been quite a lot of focus on upgradation of existing infrastructure. One, and, in terms of focusing more on safety and security as well. So where do we stand today when we talk about the state of Indian railways or the railway infrastructure in our country?
You rightly mentioned that Indian Railway is lifeline of the country. And basically the problem with Indian Railway has been that Indian Railway has not developed the infrastructure since independence as it should have developed. While the traffic, passenger traffic and freight traffic, it increased almost 16 times, the network could expand only 25%. So last 7 years, a lot of focus has been done on infrastructure development, modernization, technology development, and the facility to the customers. And that has really paid dividend. If I give you an example, if I tell you that in last 7 years, around 9,000 kilometers of the new track for new line, doubling, tripling, quadrupling has been done. And if I compare the same figure with previous 7 years, that is 2007 to 14, it was only 2,000 kilometers. So 4.5 times has been done in the last 7 years. Similarly, the electrification, almost 25,000 kilometer electrification has been done in last 7 years. And if I compare with the previous 7 years, 2007 to 14, it was only 4,000 kilometers. So more than 6 times railway electrification has been done. Similarly, on technology upgradation and safety issues, a lot of work has been done. And basically, Honorable Prime Minister gave a mantra that reform, transform, and perform. And railway has really followed this mantra. And I can just mention that in last 7 years, the safety records has been extremely good.
Okay.
In fact, for last 34 months, there was no death due to accident. Only very recently, after a gap of 34 months, a train accident took place. So, and if you see the numbers, even the consequential train accidents, they have reduced a lot.
Okay.
So having said that, I would like to mention that, a lot of work has been done in last 7 years. And that has really resulted in mobility, improving the mobility.
Okay.
Like if you see the freight, 2020-21, railway did around 1232 million ton, which was 2% more than that. And this year, railway is going to do around more than 1,400 million ton, a 15% growth. Similarly, the average speed of the freight has almost doubled.
Okay.
It used to be hardly 23 kilometers per hour. Now it is 46 kilometers per hour. So a lot of mobility has improved. And railway came out with a plan 2030 that, by 2030, what infrastructure should be developed.
Okay.
And a subset of that 2030 plan, railway has come out with a vision 2024. And a lot of infrastructure work has been targeted. 2021-22, highest capital expenditure has been envisaged. That is 2,15,000 crore.
Okay.
So last 7 years, a lot of work has been done, but still a lot of work is required to be done in next 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
So that by the end of 2024, the railway should be able to run freight trains and passenger trains as per the demand. Right now, railway is not able to fulfill the demand of passenger trains and freight trains due to infrastructure constraints.
Okay. So there is a lot which needs to be done, as you're pointing out, and we'll come to that part as well. That how can that be achieved? What are the key policy initiatives which need to be taken, and also what can be expected from the budget as well? But let's first bring in the shipping, sector here as well. Mr. Gopal Krishna, shipping and waterways is equally important when we talk about the transport sector, just like road and railways as well, and 12 major ports, around 7,500 kilometer long coastline as well. A lot of trade happens via these routes as far as India is concerned. But we've Off late we have also awakened to the possibilities there in the inland waterways part.
Right. See, the water transport sector, if you see, has got three distinct subsectors, and the name of the ministry itself signifies what these three sectors are. Since you mentioned about inland waterways, the inland waterway sector, if you see, was extremely underdeveloped. One big national waterway, which is the Ganges development, inland waterway transport development on the Ganges and also on the Brahmaputra, just started taking place from 2015. A very big project was taken, and that work is still going on. This, along with linking of the inland waterway grid system through Bangladesh and then reaching Northeast, that again has been a work which is underway. So it was essentially a highly underdeveloped sector. It is now getting developed. Government has a huge role here. Private sector is still not into it. What we lack, and we can, as you say, we'll come back to this point later on, the private sector is extremely weak here. Then we come to the port sector. The port sector, you mentioned there are 12 government ports. Major ports are essentially central government ports. And there are 200 odd state government and private ports. Here again, a lot of regulatory changes are taking place in recent times. We had a new major ports authority bill, which got passed by Parliament only in 2021. And that is probably going to change the entire structure of the port sector. Presently, if you see the entire 90% of our international trade happens through these 212 odd ports. In the government sector, 50% of the traffic it is handled by private sector, 50% by government, and the 200 minor ports are all under private hands. So roughly 75% of traffic through the ports is handled by the private sector. Government is now pursuing what is called the landlord policy model, wherein the physical infrastructure is built by the government and the commercial operations are done by the private sector. And PPP has been a huge success in the port sector. There are about 35 PPP projects which are under offer, and over the next year or two, that should mature. And that will again bring a structural change in our port sector. Coming to the shipping sector. Shipping sector, I would say, over the last 40 years, again, there has been a reversal in the structure. Earlier, Indian shipping used to take about 70% of our traffic. Today, it has come down to 5%. There are huge problems. And I think so only policy changes will be able to either stop this arrest, and again go back to reversal. So we have to make a lot of policy changes. Coasting trade, which means trade across coastline, practically is non-existent. The country is losing an immense opportunity. Just as inland waterways is important, road, rail. Similarly, if we have a huge coastline and we are not using our coastline, so there is a policy change we require to make here. Government's role is very limited because this sector is essentially internationalized. There are international shipping lines, essentially European lines, which European and Far East, shipping lines, which control the entire trade in the world. It's very difficult to compete with them unless we have a very strong and vibrant shipbuilding and a shipping industry. And I'm sure over the next, decade or so, if we take the right policy measures in the shipping sector, our shipping sector will also arrest the fall and then start recovery.
That's a very significant point which you mentioned there, Mr. Krishna, was the shipping sector in terms of what needs to be done, the challenges out there. We'll come back again to that part, but going back to Mr. Pandey. Mr. Pandey, you were earlier referring to how the roads and highways sector has done a lot, and the speed at which we are moving obviously is really significant as well. Now, the question is that to sustain this momentum, one, and two, improve further, because all of us know that the transport infra, specifically roads, do define the pace of development as well. So it's really important and critical that we keep on innovating in this particular sector and improving upon our previous achievements as well.
Yeah, sure. When I'll say the kind of pace in which we are working, maybe around a decade back, the pace of construction was around less than 10 kilometer a day. Today, we are constructing 37 kilometer a day. It is not only 37 kilometer a day, it is in terms of quality also, it is entirely different. Earlier we were constructing four lane roads. Today we are constructing 8 lane expressways. It means it is double the whatever we did earlier, but I'm only giving you only in terms of the physical kilometer of 8 lane, not only in terms of the capacity, but also in terms of the features included in the current road development. Because as you know, the we have the dubious distinction of having maximum number of fatalities on road. So we are trying to improve the road safety scenario. And when I say improving the road safety scenario, what we'll have to do is we'll have to take care of all the junctions from where the cross movement takes place.
Okay.
To take care of those junctions, we are constructing number of underpasses, number of overpasses. Not only underpasses and overpasses, the today whole concept is on the basis of the whole life cycle cost. So earlier, when I was taking a detour by running around the hillock, today we are not doing it. We are reducing the distance by construction of tunnel. So cost of construction has gone up because of the inclusion of these facilities.
Okay.
Our aim is to reduce the cost of construction, but at the same time to maintain the kind of momentum we have gained and to achieve much more than this. Certainly, we'll expect increase in the budget.
Okay.
Apart from 37 kilometer a day, which we are constructing, I'll say very proudly that during last 1 year, we have constructed 3 world records in the area of road construction, which includes all kind of road, including bituminous road as well as concrete road.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Yadav, coming to the railways part, and if we do a bit of a comparison with the road sector, one significant aspect is the involvement of private players. And of course, there has been, movement in terms of involving private players. But what is the plan ahead and what needs to be done in terms of ensuring, not only private investment or rather take a leaf out of or an example from the road sector as well?
Absolutely. Actually, we need to develop more dedicated freight corridors. And another important point is that railway need to develop multimodal logistic parks. So basically, we will have to develop our infrastructure in such a way that multimodal logistic can take place. And for that reason, the involvement of private sector is very, very necessary. And railways should develop more and more multi-logistic parks. And last year budget, around 4,000 kilometers of new dedicated freight corridors were announced. We need to develop that new dedicated freight corridor through public-private partnership.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And apart from that, apart from the involvement of private partnership and more focus on that, what is it that you expect that railways should be getting in this particular budget, the focus?
See, the most important thing for railway is safety, and therefore railway need to do the modernization. Railway need to provide the modern signaling system, modernize the coaches. So there railway will have to really focus. Mm-hmm. Now, another important item for railway is that out of 68,000 route kilometer, around 34,000 route kilometer carries 96% of the traffic. That is high density network and highly utilized network. Out of that 34,000 kilometer, around 11,000 kilometer is still single line. So railway will have to really ensure that in next 4 years, the entire 34,000 kilometer is doubled, and wherever there is a high traffic, high density network, it should be tripled and quadrupled. So basically around 14,000 kilometer, 11,000 kilometer doubling and 3,000 kilometer of multi-tracking is absolutely essential for improving the mobility. So there should be enough budget available so that railways should be able to complete this multi-tracking of 14,000 kilometer in next 3 to 4 years.
Okay.
Then another important aspect is that there are certain port connectivity projects. We have to connect with the port, around 10 port connectivity projects that need to be completed. Then there are some around 50 coal connectivity projects which is going on that needs to be completed at the earliest. So really, budget should focus on providing additional investment so that all these infrastructure work can be completed.
So the focus has to be on modernization, safety, and attracting more private equity, private investment, as well as railway is concerned. Mr. Krishna, you were earlier referring to it, your first response, vis-a-vis the shipping sector, almost the same thing, that, not only the policy tweaks, but also the involvement of private sector would be required. The question is, what kind of policy tweaks you were talking about when we look at shipping sector, and when we are talking about the forthcoming budget, what more can be done in terms of promoting inland waterways, and making the best of what we have in terms of our coastline and our shipping infra?
Yes, if you see, presently through inland waterways, of the total transport, only about 1.5% of our cargo gets transported by inland waterways. Coast, again, it is similar, 2%, 2.5%, which is for you mentioned a huge coastline. And this is a huge opportunity which we are losing. There is something called a coasting trade. The coasting trade is reserved for the domestic industry, a domestic industry which is non-existent. And I think so. This is the bane of our shipping sector. We are not able to fully utilize the coastline because we are heavily dependent on our domestic, shipping lines, which are non-existent, which are not there. So to start with, we'll have to de-license the sector. This is one sector which is licensed, and while large parts of our economy are de-licensed now, this still remains heavily licensed. It is reserved for the domestic lines. This shackle should go away. And we should allow, international lines, foreign lines to, start operating, so that a good logistic ecosystem on the coast gets developed. Once that gets developed, automatically domestic industry will also prosper and will be able to then stand on its own feet. So that is one policy tweaking which is required. Second, as we are going rapidly into privatization, we are involving the private sector in our port sector. The management of this private, PPP partnerships is gaining a lot of momentum. There are a lot of failures in PPP, and those failures need to get corrected very quickly. Only then there is going to be a renewed and a continued interest of the private sector in investing in the port sector, which obviously requires huge investment. So that management of the entire, private participation is very, very important. And government is now taking some steps by having new concession agreements, new dispute resolution mechanisms, new legal, structures. So that would be in the next, 2-3 years. That would be a big one.
That would be a very, very significant part there.
And yes, and as far as the inland waterways is concerned, development of a good fleet. And government, I think so in the budget, there are a lot of studies which are going on. Some point of time, government will have to give softs to the, for the development of this, fleet and vessels in the inland waterway sector. The fleet we have to also see, because unlike road transport where trucks life is only 15 years, the life of a transport system on the waterways is as high as 35-40 years. So we have to think long term, and therefore we have to green our vessels. That's again and that only government can take steps there. Just as in the road sector, some effort has been made in introduction of electrical vehicles.
Fair enough. So policy tweaks which you're referring to, Mr. Krishna, and also in terms of long-term policy tweaks and obviously attracting the private investment there as well. Thank you so much, Mr. Gopal Krishna, Mr. R.K. Pandey, and Mr. Vinod Kumar Yadav as well, for sharing your views and insight with our viewers. As our experts were pointing out, these three specific areas or sectors, that is road, shipping, and railways, are very crucial and very important for the overall development, economic development, as well as infrastructural development of our country. And a lot of work has been done in the past few years, but there is always a scope for improvement. And that improvement, as our experts were pointing out, can come both in terms of policy tweaks and also in terms of attracting private investments and providing more funds as well. We'll have to wait and watch as to what the budget has in store for these three areas, and we'll keep you apprised of the same. Till then, keep watching Sansad Television. Thank you.